Well, just looking at the time and conscious that everyone has made time to join us tonight, like Jen and I, likely with some very busy households behind us all, we might kick off, but obviously we'll still have lots more people joining us. So first and foremost, thank you to everyone online for joining us and taking time out of your very busy schedules, which the report we're going to talk to tonight further confirms for us all that we are living very busy lives. And a big welcome to our parenting expert, Gen Muir, who's joining us yet again for another great webinar. And actually, Jen, this is a little piece. This arrived in the mail to me today. So for those online, this is Jen's wonderful book, Little People, Big Feelings, and probably well known to a lot of you online tonight. So thank you so much, Jen, for joining us.
Thank you so much. I love working with you guys.
Now I'm just going to work out, there we go, how to do the slides for everyone. I'm not a tech person, but we will work through this together because I got new screens installed in my office today, so I'm juggling that as well. So for those of you that haven't met me, I am Emily Casca, the CEO at Playgroup New South Wales. I've been in this awesome role about 4 months now, and I have a little boy myself, Otis, a single mum to Otis who's now 10, and really excited to also reintroduce you to Jen from Connected Parenting. And Jen, I actually learnt through this that you have a background as an obstetric social worker. Tell me a bit about that.
Yeah, so look, when I initially started at the Mater, I started in obstetric social work, which is helping parents with anything that comes up in the process of having a baby. I worked in bereavement and when things are kind of quite stressful, but I started to also simultaneously run these classes for parents on adjusting to parenthood for the first time, adjusting to parenthood for the second time. And it was those classes where I just found my kind of, what do they say, when all the areas of your life just zoom into something you're meant to be doing. And I suddenly realized I had this huge passion for parent education. And so I had to wind back some of the other social work, but I still work at the Mater teaching those 2 classes. I just don't do as much of the obstetric social work anymore.
Fascinating, and what an interesting space to be in. Thank you. And
Yes.
also, you are a mum to 4 boys yourself. Yes, 4. Wild. Well done.
Thank you. Do you know, it's funny, my youngest said tonight at the dinner table, he said, wow, Mum, I was just thinking about you. How lucky are you to get 4 kids of the one gender? Like 4 boys. You are so lucky. I said, Harry, I am really lucky.
Jen, I feel like we live polar opposite lives. As I dragged Otis here into my office, grabbing some takeaway dinner on the way, I was saying to him, oh, do you kind of wish that you had siblings? And he was like, nope, I am very happy just being myself and just being you. So yeah. I don't think he could envisage being in a household with 3 other boys. So well done to you.
I think there's so much magic in every single makeup.
There is. So before we kick off tonight, we did want to do our acknowledgement of country because it's really important to us. So I am joining from Gadigal land. And for those of you from across New South Wales and across Australia, I want to pay my respects to elders past, present, future and emerging. Because for us, particularly in the playgroup space, we know that our elders and the first custodians and forever custodians of this land had such beautiful playtime and storytelling. And we really try and carry that through our work here at Playgroup New South Wales. So for any First Nations people on this call tonight, I pay my respects to you and to your communities, and also to all of you from the lands that you're joining us from. So our wonderful webinar, a very quick bit of housekeeping for you all, just to let you know that the recording in full and all of the slides that we share tonight will be shared with you after the event. We'll email them straight through to you. We do have the chat function available at the start, so we have an amazing little tech team working their magic behind the scenes. It is certainly not me because I'm not a tech person. So at the moment, if there are any tech issues or you can't hear us or you can't see us, do just pop some comments into that chat section, and they're there for tech support. And we've also got a Q&A spot. I believe it's at the bottom here, and that's available throughout the presentation. So when Jen and I were preparing, we were saying, look, as we go through some comments or some slides, and I'll do my best to keep an eye on it as well. Please do pop your Q&A in. If it's relevant, we'll bring it up then. Obviously, we'll try to get to them all, but also at the end, there'll be plenty of time for Q&A as well. So, and also obviously it's National Playgroup Week. Obviously pretty biased here at Playgroup New South Wales. It's one of our favourite weeks of the year. And this webinar is just one of the many things that we have on this week celebrating playgroups and play more broadly. So you can check out our website there. There's something on, or more than one thing on every day that parents can engage in. And we've got lots, in addition to our webinar, something particular to parents is we've got about 30 early home learning resources and fact sheets all about early childhood development launching across the week as well. So let's get into it. And I think one thing that we're joined by Jen is that children need this freedom and time to play. And I think what when we get into the report, but I love your commentary on this here, is like play can be seen as a bit of a luxury or something that we don't have time to do. But it actually really is such a necessity, isn't it, Jen?
Yeah, look, they say that play is the work of childhood. It's really the work of kids. And something that I say often is that it takes our kids 300 repetitions in order to build a new synapse or a new, to learn something new within the brain, unless it's done through play, in which case it takes 12 to 14 repetitions. So what we know is that it's when our children's minds are open and in that beautiful space that they go to during play that they can learn absolutely everything. And it's not just the social skills or the physical fine and gross motor skills, it's their math skills, it's their English skills, it's the skills that they'll be needing when they sit at a desk in the classroom. So I'm so passionate about it because of how much it does for our kids. And once you sort of realize that, you realize it's so powerful. But as I'm a bit biased in that I talk a lot about emotions with kids, and I know how good it is for helping kids process emotions and regulate emotions. So I love it for that reason. And when we harness it well, it also makes our lives a little bit easier in the home. And that's what I can't wait to talk about tonight.
Yeah, absolutely, Jen. So well said and fascinating. I actually didn't know about that really reduced rate of repetition through play. Fascinating.
Yeah, it's incredible. And to think that we used to sit kids down and sort of hold up flashcards, to try and teach them their ABCs. And we now know they're learning so much faster through child-led play.
Fascinating. I'll put away the flashcards then at home.
Mental note, no more flashcards.
So something that we wanted to share, and before we get into a lot of Jen's really practical tips, which I'm excited about, is that today some of you may have seen Jen on television this morning, which, Jen, you can fill everyone in on. It was on Channel
9 on Today
yes.
Extra. Talking about this great Big Start report and some of the highlights that have come out of it. I'll let you share some of these and I'll talk about some more as well.
Yeah, fabulous. Thanks, Jen. So Playgroup New South Wales, we've had a 10-year partnership this year with Lego Australia, particularly in the Duplo space, and they've been so important to our community playgroups in terms of resourcing them and the partnership that we do with Lego. And so to mark our 10 years this year, we just released today the Big Start report, where we wanted to get an insight into what is play looking like out there in the land of modern parenting. What are parents saying about play, how they feel about play, how they value play, what are the barriers to play, so that we at Playgroup New South Wales, as well as Lego Australia, as well as experts like Jen, can really see what's happening for parents out there and what can we do to bridge some of those gaps. So there was some findings that we were going to share tonight, and then Jen was going to give her commentary on it and any of ours as well from Playgroup New South Wales. So the first was, and I can feel this one, that 4 in 5, or about 80% of parents reported in this report that they are struggling to engage in play. But it's not because there's the struggle with the play itself, it's because our modern lives are leading us to feel exhausted, stressed, and there's just time constraints, and that's something that I can certainly relate to. But the flip side of this is that also that despite play being really widely recognised as parents as essential, that came through so strongly, that play is valued and that we as parents know that it is essential. 1 in 3 of the parents that we surveyed across this report feel uninspired by playtime or not quite sure what to do with playtime. And again, not surprisingly, something that has been in the media probably a fair bit in recent years is screen time guilt looms large. And I say this as I sit here with my son in the next room on his iPad myself. So I am one of the 6 in 10 parents included in this survey that feels that conflict about your child's social media use. And so, Jen, with these findings, albeit to us at Playgroup New South Wales, probably not overly surprising, I'd love to hear your views on what you saw in this.
Yeah, look, I'm not at all surprised about the stress and the time constraints. I love that parents are aware of wanting play. And the biggest thing, my biggest outtake is I just want to spread the word. Parents, you are doing so much better than you realize, because actually parents are sort of feeling guilty and feeling sort of worried about the screens. And yet what we know is that modern millennial parents are actually spending more time playing with their kids. Even a millennial parent that's working full or part-time is playing with their children more than a stay-at-home parent was in 1975. So really we need to like ditch that guilt completely and say, wow, not only are we playing with our kids more, we're also holding so much together. So I will sort of nod to some of that stress and pressure in a bit more detail tonight. But I would say, and I will give some tips as well as how we link from screen time. But I think, Emily, you know, we need to use screen time. It's part of our kids' world. It's not the enemy. You're able to do your work and keep your child safe in sort of one moment. And then it's about, well, how do we link off that screen time? And I believe we harness play for that. We can use play to bridge from our child's screens, off the screens, into the play world. And I'll give some examples of how to do that tonight as well.
Great, Jen. I will be listening very eagerly to that one in particular. But also, I know at Playgroup New South Wales, when we saw this whole exhaustion stress, not only my own personal experience of it, but other parents that we support in our playgroups, I think, you know, we often say, like, we didn't wake up exhausted, stressed, or time constraints in this world of cost of living pressures, dual income families, and the pressures that families are feeling in this modern age. It's kind of no wonder we're feeling that way. So I absolutely echo you when you say, parents, you're doing an amazing job. And I think that speaks to the next finding in the slide. And it's what you were alluding to, Jen, that despite this feeling of being stressed, overwhelmed, maybe not making time for play, feeling a bit uninspired by play, the stats in the report were actually really pleasing to see that toddlers are spending 52 hours a week playing, most often with mum, dedicating around 18 hours on average in the report, which is pretty significant. Dad's not too far off either there in 13 hours, and siblings. So I'd love your thoughts on that as well, Jem.
Yeah, I just think it reflects exactly what I know and exactly what we're seeing in other data as well, that parents are spending more time focusing on their children, the care of them, and playing with them more than in the past, which is amazing. And it really is enough. We don't need to do more. It's actually about maybe harnessing that play, and we'll focus on the tips for that tonight.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know, because I've had a sneak peek at those tips, I know that what I love and appreciate as a busy single mum myself is it's quality over quantity. And it's, you know, whilst those metrics and the hours look great, I am nowhere near those hours. But where I can build it in, which is some of the tips that we've talked about, I found that so useful.
Yeah.
The other part is, of course, play barriers. We really wanted to understand what is inhibiting parents. And again, it was so pleasing. And again, probably not surprising that nearly all parents agree that play is clearly important for their child's learning and development. We at Playgroup New South Wales actually found that interesting, because a big part of our model is that it's not just important for the child's development, but a lot of work we're doing this year is actually also really important for the parent-child bond, for the parents' time out and community development as well. But this research report showed us, though, that 80% of parents say that they face really significant challenges in engaging themselves in their child's play. And again, we come back to probably 2 slides ago, Jen. It is hard when you're feeling tired, stressed, overwhelmed, or just a sheer lack of time.
Yeah, I mean, we are pulled away by our phones. 20 years ago, our parents didn't have a phone to draw them away with work emails where you're contactable constantly, WhatsApp groups that are pinging all the time. So we're sort of drawn away by that. We're always available and always on. We've got more financial pressure. We're working harder. I think I just saw in the chat, somebody's just said something about issue is 5 kids, and I feel you, babe. 4 kids.
Yes, Anna.
Don't worry, I'm bringing the tips tonight. How do you manage playtime when not only are there sort of multiple needs, so you might have older kids that are needing help with their homework, and how do we play with a younger child and sort of make all that happen when we're just so busy, but also sometimes multiple children just will fight when we even try to play. So it's about how do we harness that and help our kids with the energy and the emotion so that it works.
Yeah, and thank you, Sana, for that great question. And to everyone else online, please do keep the questions coming because it's great, because it adds a lot of flavour to the presentation, and we want to make sure that we're giving you all the advice that's really relevant to you as well. In terms of the attitudes to play, this was something that in this report we were really interested in looking at and in also speaking to government about. And like I said, overwhelmingly, it's really important to be engaged in play, but then we as parents, the reality is that we're finding it really overwhelming, uninspiring, or sometimes frustrating. And this is something that we do hear a fair bit at playgroups, and why we find parents come to playgroups is because there is a little bit of a lacking confidence in play. Parents tell us, I don't know what to do. The games now are different. I didn't experience that as a child, so I don't know how to do it now with my own child. So Jen, I'd love your feedback on that as well.
You know, it makes a lot of sense. For many of us, we weren't played with by our parents, so it's sort of hard to find that. Or maybe we were, or maybe we played with neighbourhood kids, but it's been a while. My biggest tip, and I'll be talking about it more tonight, but it's actually just slowing down, coming along your side and just observing what they're doing. Imagine this mum in this picture here is just saying, wow, yeah, you've got the rocket ship going, or whatever that is in that child's mind. We just narrate out loud what our child is doing. We don't always even have to join in. Just that alone is really, really powerful for kids. Just seeing them in their play is 90% of it. And then sometimes we step 2 feet in and we join in, and I'll talk about some tips for that as well. But really, it is so much simpler than you think. And while it makes so much sense to feel overwhelmed, what I want to say to parents is the kids know how to play. So all we have to do is get out of the way and watch what they're doing, and actually it gets taken care of for us. It's so much simple.
Yeah, it's so true, Jen. And there's also Christy, thank you, another question. In terms of how important, Jen, it goes off your comment just then, Jen, but maybe we can expand on it further about the importance of letting the child lead the play.
So important. I'm racing Emily because she wants to say the same thing. It's so important. There's so much adult-led play these days, particularly because kids are engaged in team sports from much younger. And what we know is that really for play to be truly that beneficial, beautiful, open-minded learning experience for kids, it really does need to be child-led and open-ended. And kids really do play in the way that they need. And there's another saying we sort of use, which is kids will play what they cannot say. So sometimes it's just allowing the space for that lets kids get into it. But sometimes it can feel daunting, or your child is always pulling you in to run the game, and we can talk about that tonight. So do throw those questions into the chat if you're looking for help with that.
Yeah, great, Jen. And yes, here, child-led play all the way. Like, yes, there's co-participation, facilitation, guided play, all the things, but we really see the richness in pure child-led play. And then I do think that also as a parent, just like you say, following the child's lead, I think that for me takes some of that lack of confidence or anxiety out of it. I'm just going to roll with this. And I think with these attitudes to play, Jen, when we were talking before this webinar, whilst we want to do some work around building parent perceptions of value and confidence and engagement in play, I made the comment to you that I'm certain if we interviewed or surveyed the children, they'd say 100%, even if it was 1 minute of play, they feel like their parent is adding value, getting down on the floor, talking about the rocket ship. So I think sometimes as parents, we're a little bit too hard on ourselves in these things.
Definitely.
And the last part of the stats that we were going to share before Jen gets into her amazing practical tips, and this was such a pleasing result. And I know, Jen, you're such a advocate for this, but it was great to see it reflected in the parents surveyed, because it was a survey of over 1,000 parents from all across Australia. And the vast majority ranked social skills as their top priority now, which has really surpassed probably the more traditional learning styles of your linguistic and motor skills. So very clearly in this survey, social and emotional skills are much more highly valued by parents and by modern parents. And I'd love your thoughts on that, Jen.
Yeah, look, it's great to see parents valuing the social and the emotional skills. There was a kind of a period in the deep dark 90s where we were sort of very, very focused on IQ. You know, we really wanted to have the brightest, smartest kid, and we thought that we did that by teaching them from a very young age. And now we're really realizing it's all about EQ, that if our children have those beautiful social skills, those emotional skills, the cognitive skills will just come on as well at the same time. And they really need those social and emotional skills in order to get on with others and sort of survive and thrive. So I love that parents are aware of it and they are picking the right vehicle if we're focusing on play to achieve those things, because it absolutely is the best way to learn.
Yeah, absolutely. They're really such foundational skills. And I've even noticed a little bit of a shift in the last sort of 2 years, even at Otis's school, albeit now that he's 10, but coming into NAPLA. And as we were talking about in the opening, I've noticed that the school are taking a much more like socio-emotional approach to testing, as opposed to probably the old school way that I remember, where there was a lot of stress and pressure around the motor and the linguistic and the more traditional skills around tests. So it's nice to see it coming into the education system a little bit as well.
Yeah, it is fantastic to see.
We've got another question in here from Sophie, and it's just about how would you rank playtime compared to experiences for young preschool children, such as train rides, the zoo, the aquarium trips? So more experiential play or playtime compared to the experiences.
I think kids need both, and we can view those trips on the train as a beautiful, deeper, enriching development of play. If your child's really into playing with their Lego Duplo train set, or they're really into talking about rocket ships, and we're able to deepen that with the trip on the train, or deepen that by a trip to the museum, that's a beautiful thing to do, and both are good. But we definitely don't want to have our kids so scheduled and so busy with activities that they just don't have any time to really get bored. We want kids to get bored enough that they can almost play with the cardboard box, or they can just sort of make a game out of nothing, or sometimes they sit and they just watch an ant crawling along the back deck, and play can come from those kind of moments as well.
Yeah, it's interesting, Jen. I was chatting to a dad that comes to one of our playgroups, and he was saying, yeah, I've had this turning point where I used to fill our weekends with structured plays, that I felt like we'd going from gymnastics to the jungle gym to then swimming, because that's where I felt the comfort, because I had the structure and the routine. And he said, and then things fell apart because I got an injury, so we couldn't be as active. And I found this isn't because it's a partnership with Lego, but literally playing Lego at home with my son and just being still made his son so much calmer. And he's like, and we just connected on such a deep level. He's like, what was I doing all these years trying to fill the schedule?
And I think that's part of the pressure that's on modern parents. There's almost this myth we've got to make our children's childhoods magical, and we've got to give them every experience in order to get them ahead. And yet what actually gets them ahead is slowing down. And that can feel like really pushing against the trend. I've found that really hard to do when I feel like all of my, my peers, as I was raising my boys, had their kids in a million activities, and you start to panic and think, is my child missing out because they're not doing Taekwondo and, like all the other things. And those things are good in addition to, but kids definitely are craving downtime and that free space to sort of play creatively.
Yeah, and it's interesting, Jen, at Playgroup New South Wales, something we reference a lot is Article 31 of the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child, that says every child has the right to both play and rest, to recreation and leisure and rest. And I think they're deliberately coupled together, I think, for that purpose, that in downtime, children do get that. We've got another great question here from Holly, and forgive me, I'm looking down because the questions are below me. And she's saying that her child is really engaged in independent play. Well done. And also really happy with a parent, grandparent, or adult. So her question was, should she keep encouraging and finding more opportunities for peer-to-peer play with other children, or just let it go and lean into her child's preferences around more independent play or older adult play?
Does she say how old her child is?
No, but Holly, if you can pop into the chat.
It depends on the age, but particularly in the early years, we just don't necessarily need a ton of peer-to-peer play. We don't need it all the time. It's great if we've got a child that's playing independently. It sounds like she's got a great imagination, and she's relying on those the care figures, so the grandparents and parents, which is fantastic. And then as kids hit that 3, 4, 5, it can be, and even 2, it can be good to give them opportunities to play around and with other children. At 2, they're not really playing with them, they're parallel playing, but there's still some skill involved in that. And then building into some social interactions is great, because they're those moments our child learns to share, and they're going to learn to take turns, and all of those things will be really hard, but some practice at that is quite good as well.
Another question actually that's kind of linked, and you've answered some of it, I think, from Hoda. She's saying that she's just started taking her 13-month-old to Playgroup. Thank you, Hoda. And I actually experienced this too, but he gets quite shy in those settings. And so just any tips on sort of, I guess, that transition to more peer-to-peer play and how to facilitate that, Jen?
So first of all, that shyness makes so much sense. And I would love to reframe that right now and say, it sounds like your child is really discerning. They don't know these people. And so they've turned up and they're going to be a little bit cautious and hang very close to their safe person while they work out who's who and whether those people are safe. That's a really important skill for kids to develop. So really, really giving yourself a pat on the back because your child's able to show, hey, I need you because I don't know these people yet. In order to help our kids feel that confidence and build into it, a couple of things that will make a difference. And we'll talk about some ways we can use play to do this in the back half of this as well. But you want to kind of prep your child for what's going. We're going to Playgroup today, and we want to talk about who we will see there. And if there's a particular toy that was at Playgroup last time that our child did enjoy when they did engage, you might bring up that toy because kids really link into that. Remember how we did the Lego Duplo, or remember how we played in the sand pit, or remember you saw that kid Freddie, you know, he might be there and this is what's going to happen, and mummy will be there and I will hold your hand if you need me, and it's okay to stay with me as long as you need until you feel ready to join in. And then what we're looking for is the cues in our child. Often there'll be an interested little look at something. They might look over at the, you know, it's something in the corner and you might say, looks like you're interested in having a go with that. Should we go over together? And we just follow their lead, bringing them over, and then we're slowly separating back if that's the case, or staying with our child as long as they need if it's a parent and child play group.
Great tips, Jen. I wish I heard those a good 9 years ago. It took me a while to get Otis off the hip. And it's actually interesting. A parent friend and I also pointed out some of the mixed messages that we can inadvertently give our children. If it's just some people, we're like, go give them a hug, say hi, and other ones were like, no, stranger danger, stay back. And so I think we as parents can sometimes be giving confused messages to our children as well.
Yeah, look, it's one of the ones I learned the hard way, but if we can really, you know, what we like to say is dependence leads to independence. So really allowing your child to lean in and be dependent on you, often that's all they need to be like, okay, I'm off.
Yes, yeah, that little touch of the safety net and then they're off. We've got
Yep.
another question, and it's an interesting one because at Playgroup New South Wales we do quite a lot of nature play and outdoor play. However, through that we actually realise there's not a lot of shade in public parks and public playgrounds, and so this question links to that from Shaduli, and she was asking for babies below 1 year old, just if you had any views on playing outdoors versus indoor settings, obviously being conscious of UV risks, and this is a very nature-loving family, Shaduli says. So just any ideas you have around that sort of outdoor versus indoor play, particularly for super young bubs?
For super young bubs, we do want to keep them in the shade in that first year. And I can't give medical advice, but I know there is advice around what sunscreen, whether you can even use sunscreen at all, or sort of what sunscreens are appropriate for babies. So definitely something to check with your GP, not with me. But yeah, if we can find a shady spot, and we can even incorporate play into our days. One of the things I used to do when I had a very young baby is I had a little mums and bubs fitness group. We would plonk all the babies in their prams under the shade around nap time. And as they woke up and we'd finished our fitness group, or sometimes you did your fitness group while holding your baby just to get through it because they'd already woken up. And so you used your baby as the weight. But we were able to have a bit of time for us and a bit of playtime with the babies. And, they just have a bit of play, even just looking at a blade of grass or looking at the trees can be a beautiful way to play.
Oh, beautiful. Thanks, Jen. We'll keep the questions coming.
Should I share my...
That's the last slide. Yeah, we're going to switch over to Jen's slides now. Right. So I'll stop sharing, Jen. It's over to you, but please keep the question coming. I have one question I can actually ask you, Jen, while we're doing the changeover too. Thanks for M. Nice to meet another M.
Can you see my slides, Emily?
I can, yeah. Thanks, Jen. So a question from M, and I am very guilty of this as well. So M also has so many toys, and you often buy more a lot, or very loving, doting grandparents, in our case, just keep giving more, even though we say no. So for her, but her 2-year-old normally just plays over and over with just particular 2 or 3 toys. And so M's question was just any advice that you have around stop buying toys, or do you sort of do swap in, swap out, rotating through toys? Any ideas you have there?
I love the idea of rotating. I'm going to say I'm quite biased, and one of the reasons I do partner with Lego Duplo is that of all the toys we had over the years, it was just the one toy that not only lasted and was durable and was able to be used in so many different ways, but I find a lot of the modern toys, particularly if they're very, very noisy and they're sort of oriented in they can only do one thing. For example, so with something like Lego Duplo, you can build it in lots of different ways. You can use it in lots of different ways. Whereas when a toy kind of only can do one thing, it's not offering our kids as much development. And in my opinion, it winds up in landfill and kids get really bored of it. So that's just what I saw over the years. And I tended to move towards more open-ended toys like Lego Duplo or wooden marble runs. You know, I love dress ups. Things like that that are sort of more open-ended, I did find to be really useful. And don't underestimate a cardboard box, honestly, for your kids. It is just one of the best toys in the world and it costs you nothing. With the grandparents, the other thing, little tip before I get into my content, is advise the grandparents that activities are better. So that can help as well. But I hope that answers that question.
Great. Thanks, Jen.
Okay, so very quickly, I just want to sort of acknowledge thank you to Playgroup New South Wales for having me. I love working with you guys. I'm a huge fan of the work you do. And as I've said to you, Emily, before, when I was living in Brisbane with 2 small children, it was playgroups that literally saved my bacon when I knew nobody. And actually, even before that, I used playgroups with my first son, just learning with that beautiful guidance how to kind of start to play with him and how to do some things with him made such a big difference in my parenting. And I'm a huge fan of working with Lego Duplo, obviously, as well, because like I said, I've just seen the impact that has for my kids and just how much we can get out of it. And I'm going to talk you through some of those great things today. And I'm going to start with a highlight. This is a beautiful highlight moment. This is my son Tommy and his cousin Jasper, and this is from a few years ago. And I kind of want to highlight how just from these small moments we build big futures. And why are we talking about play and why am I so passionate about it as a parent educator? Simply because all of the things we're hoping for our kids to learn do really happen best through play. So we looked at that stat at the start where it's so many less repetitions of even teaching our child the word monkey, or all those little things that they've got to do, learning their fine and gross motor skills happen so much faster when they're playing. And this is a moment from my house where you can see how play can be so beautiful. These boys worked all day on this little Lego Duplo structure in my house, and they had a whole narrative about what was going on in this, and they were so proud of it. And you can really see in moments like this with your kids how play is the work of childhood. You can see the pride on their faces. But rest assured, I'm going to finish with a very different story of where play can all go very wrong, so that you know that we all have very imperfect moments in our houses as well. So a couple of things I want to cover tonight. The first thing, I just want to acknowledge the world we're parenting in, and Emily and the questions we did earlier, we've covered a fair bit of this, but what I really want to do is nod to this. If you are feeling like the pressure is real, all of those stats we saw in the survey about how parents are feeling so much more guilt these days, if you're feeling that, you are not imagining it, it is genuinely real. We are parenting in a very different world. There are different financial pressures. There are different busyness pressures. There is the information overload where we actually know so much more about the way in which we want to raise kids. And this was reflected in that research where we saw that parents are aware of play. They're aware of wanting to boost those EQ or social and emotional skills, and yet feeling, if anything, rather than quite proud of themselves because they are doing something about these things, they're feeling lots of guilt. And I want to address a bit of that tonight and cut to it. We've talked about those barriers to playtime, but in addition to what we saw in the research, which was that parental overwhelm, someone in a question did sort of mention multiple kids. That can be a real barrier. We've got some beautiful sibling squabbling going on here with some playtime, and I'm sure anyone with multiple kids can relate. Some of us feel really unsure about how to play or what to do, and sometimes we have a child with additional needs or we have additional needs, and I just want to nod to those being genuine barriers. But my solutions tonight are going to be something that anyone can do, and a lot of them honestly in kind of less than a minute. So we're going to make it really simple. So the second thing I want to cover, and this is really the crux of it, why does play meet the core needs of kids and how it's much, much simpler than we think? So My passion is helping parents with understanding the emotional needs of kids, and it can be really simplified down to these 3 core questions. Children need to know consistently and constantly from their primary caregivers, from us, are they loved, are they safe, and are they seen and heard? And we answer that quite simply through physical connection and play is how we answer, am I loved? We answer through our beautiful boundaries and limits, am I safe? And we answer through sitting with our kids in their emotions and helping them coach through some of the struggles they're having, am I seen and heard? And these are the core needs of kids. Despite all of that pressure to have organic food delivered at every mealtime and making sure you're eating with the kids and making sure they're not on screens too much and making sure they get good sleep, but they also have lots of extracurricular, all of that stuff is going on in our heads, and yet our kids are just looking for the answer to those 3 core questions. So when we can meet those questions with a resounding yes, it goes a lot better. And what I'm going to talk about tonight is how it's actually through little playful moments that we answer these core questions. So we're going to start with connection because it's where I always start. And it is as simple as this. If you're sitting here thinking, how do I do this in the way that's right? This is that if I could give you just one thing, it would be this. When we stop and we see our child's world through their eyes, which is simply talking out loud about what a child feels, sees, or experiences, they feel seen. So one of the biggest things we can do with this child who's trying to click his little Lego Duplo bricks together is stop and say, yeah, they're really tricky to get on. I don't know if anyone's ever been in that situation, but kids can really struggle clicking those bricks together. And when we stop and just see them in that, or maybe he builds a beautiful tower and we say, yeah, you built a tower. Joining our child in play is actually as simple as just seeing what they're doing. And honestly, if you could take just that one point out of this and know that you can incorporate that into the tiny moments in your day, and I promise you, it is game changing. When I want my children to put on their shoes and get out the door, the single biggest thing I will do to ensure that they are willing to do that is I will stop and talk out loud about what they are doing. And usually that's play. Like, wow, you guys are having so much fun on the trampoline. You're having the best time. I might have to say, I know it's hard to stop. We now need to put our shoes on. But you can really see in their eyes and their bodies that they love it when we stop and we notice what they do. Because let's remember, play is the work of childhood. So when we notice their work, they feel seen and they feel amazing. So it's one of the best things that we can do. So this playful connection helps our kids to listen. It helps with transitions. It helps with sibling tension. It helps with confidence and worries, and it builds self-esteem much more than praise. So a couple of quick tips. We want to fill the tank with mini moments. Our kids process love through touch and time. And this is simply because our children can't process the concept of a parent's love even at 2 or at 3, even at 10, even at 15. That's a really adult and complex concept. And yet when we just show them through physical moments, they feel so seen. So when we notice them playing, when we narrate their play, when we do the serve and return through play. So it might be our child goes broom with the truck and we go broom back and we join in. That's called a serve and return. It's like a game of tennis and it is amazing for kids. Silly play and rough and tumble play. Sometimes we're playing here, these kids are drawing and we wind up rumbling and it makes them feel delightful. So these are the things that we can do. If you want to supercharge that play, this concept of special time is really, really powerful for our kids. To make time with our kids special, we have to name it. It's got to be one-on-one and led by our child. So just say your child absolutely loves kicking the soccer ball. We say to them, I really want to have some soccer time with you later this afternoon. I'm going to make sure my work's done or I'm going to put the baby in bed and then let's have some time together. But the way you make special time land is in the anticipation of it and in how you talk about it afterwards. So beforehand, you say, I cannot wait for time with you. In the moment, you just show them by being 2 feet in for that 9 or 10 minutes. And then afterwards, you say, my highlight of today was having time with you. And this makes our kids feel amazing. So let's talk about how we do this in a practical sense. So playful or silly transitions. Just 5 to 10 minutes before the evening routine, what we might do is use a bit of playtime so that we can help our kids with that transition. We might bring toys to dinner. We might say, which toy do you want to bring in the car? Which piece of Lego do you want to bring into the bath? And we might bring our child's favorite little soft toy to dinner and make them talk at the table. So being silly lowers cortisol in our child's brain, and it is one of the best things you can do right before a transition. My 8-year-old, he is meant to feed the dog, and every single day if I say, hey Harry, feed the dog, he says, why is it always me? Or my legs don't work, or no. And if I just talk in the dog's voice, hey Harry, I'm really hungry, next thing I know, he's laughing and he's feeding that dog. So really something to give a go in your day to increase connection. The next need that I talked about is those boundaries and limits. Our kids need to know, am I safe? And we can also teach them or use play to facilitate our ability to set those beautiful limits that make our kids feel safe. So play is actually how kids explore limits. So that question earlier about whether my child needs sort of friends, eventually, yeah, because as they learn to share with other kids, we're probably going to have to set lots and lots of limits in order to help them navigate sharing or turn taking. Play is also how kids explore just the limits of their physicality. They might push a toy into you too hard and you say, ow, you know, that hurts. And they're learning about their impact on others, and they're learning how to play safely. So that's really important. But limits are really tricky for modern parents, and I want to explain why. Most of us were raised with something called the stick. It's a behavioralist model where timeouts, smacking, threats, punishments, or ignoring were used to teach us how to behave, right? And it definitely taught us where the limits were, but it didn't help us learn how to do that thing differently. Modern parenting, we're using a bit of bribing, begging, rewarding, praising, and distracting. And yet there is another way to set a limit that helps our child learn. So before I say that, I want to just reassure you, you're allowed to use some of these things in your parenting. And I want to give you an example from my house. At least once a week, I'm going to walk into my kids' room and say, guys, if you don't clean this room, there'll be no screen time later. Does it work? Yes, it 100% does. They're very motivated by their screen time and they will clean that room. I can also use a bribe or a reward. I might say, hey guys, if you do clean your room all week, we can have some dessert on the weekend. Will it work? Yes, it will work. But unfortunately, it won't teach my child how to be a thoughtful, intuitive member of a team. It won't teach them how to clean that room by themselves. So I'm going to have to stay on the bribe and the threat train. Now, that's an okay thing, especially if you have young kids. You can use these things for sure, especially the bribing to get a child out of the park or out of the bath. You're going to do that stuff a lot, and that's totally, totally fine. But when we want to teach, so particularly around social skills, learning to share, those things are not going to work because our child is dysregulated when they're struggling with those things. So I've got 4 steps to a boundary that you can use even when your child is dysregulated. You can use these steps when you've tried the little bribe of, if you leave the park now, we can do something nice, and your child says, I don't care what you offer, I'm staying. We're going to have to do something different. So the first step is we need to regulate ourselves and find our firm and our kind. Some of us are on the firm side, some of us are on the kind side, and we're really trying to find a balance in that moment. And then we've got this beautiful empathy sandwich. We name the want or the feeling for our child. We step in and let our child know really clearly what can and can't happen, and then we allow the emotions that flow. So what does this actually mean in terms of play? Let's have a look. It's an empathy sandwich where we might just narrate what's happening. You really want the red brick. I can't let you take it from Paddy. He's using it, and I'm looking at his face. He's not ready to share yet. I know, it's really hard to wait. I'm going to sit here with you. We can then emotion coach our child and say, I wonder what we can do while we're waiting. Waiting is hard. Now, in this beautiful empathy sandwich, because we didn't distract our child, because we allowed that play to help us set that boundary, so much is happening. We've just brought that beautiful emotion of struggling with learning to wait from the back of the brain all the way to the front. We have coached our child through that emotion and co-regulated with them, but we've also set a beautiful firm limit which makes them feel safe and helps them learn a more pro-social way to get on with others. The same thing might happen if we're doing drawing with this child. You're mad and I can't let you throw. I'm going to hold these pencils until we can be safe. I know it's hard. Okay, so those boundaries link straight into the third need of our kids, which is their emotions. And kids will often play what they can't say. So I want to talk about how we can use play to help with those emotional climbs that happen for our kids. So kids will show up to 10 lower level emotions before they melt down. Meltdowns are inevitable, and they are how kids develop their ability to feel their feelings. So they're really, really normal. We don't want to stop them or shut them down, but it would be nice if we could lower the intensity. And low level emotion coaching, especially done through play, because remember, we're learning things much faster through play, is the way to go. So what we want to do is go beyond the toast or the shoes or the cup, whatever our child is upset about, and use curiosity to understand what might be underneath those emotions, and then use play to help with struggles. So I've got a child here struggling with his dinner. And, you know, we can be tempted to say, look, just have a bite and you can have dessert, which is a bribe. Or if you don't have a bite, there will be no dessert, which is a threat. Now, both of these things may work some of the time, but usually not, because our child is a bit dysregulated. And often what's happening is our child here is on an emotional climb. And what they're really needing is for us to step in and do one of two things. One might be just go beyond that dinner and say, hey, I can see you're really not sure about this pumpkin, whatever it is. And also, it's been a long day at school, hasn't it? Or it's tough being a little brother sometimes. And the other thing we can do is get our play out. We might bring our child's favorite toy to the table. So let's look at how we might actually do it. But before we do, I want to kind of acknowledge, why do we struggle with picking up these lower level emotions? And that's really because our own feelings about feelings can get in the way. We are doing something our parents did not do for us. And I really want to acknowledge this tonight. Millennial parents are doing the most amazing job where they're trying to sit with their kids and name some emotions and help them with play. And these are often things that were not done for us. So if you were sent to your room when you cried, it is very, very hard to sit with your child when they're crying. And so it's just very important to acknowledge we're struggling, not because we're not very nice people or we're not good parents, but just because we're doing something that wasn't modeled for us that is incredibly hard to do. So what we're really doing here is going beyond the behavior. What we see is the sibling struggles or the meltdowns or the hitting, and what's underneath is an emotion, tiredness, feeling small, fear, or seeking connection. And we can name this through play. So just say our child is really nervous about going to the doctor and we know it's going to be an issue. Maybe they need to have an immunization or something. We're really worried. Play can help that little brain adjust. We might play out the upcoming doctor's visit or, you know, the change in childcare or even the bedtime routine. We might let our child be the doctor and their toy can be them, or we could be the doctor and our child's toy can be the patient. You know, we can really play it out in different ways. And what happens is your child gets to play out those things they can't say, and we get to prep them for what's going to come up in a way that really works for our child. The other thing we can do to help with emotions through play is just when our kid's tower falls over and they're just disappointed, inevitable. And I'm going to finish with a story about this happening in my house in a second. And you might say, oh no, it fell over. I'd be upset too. You've worked so hard on this. This is tricky. That is really important because our temptation is to fix it or to solve it or say, don't worry about it. It's just a tower. You can rebuild it. That's kind of what we do because we're struggling with our emotions. And if we can just sit in it, we're doing a beautiful job of co-regulating and bringing that emotion to the front of the brain, which builds that beautiful EQ and lets our child get the most out of play. We can also emotion coach in the good times. You did it all by yourself. I can see by your big smile, you feel so good. It's so much more powerful for our kids than good job, you're so clever, you're so amazing, which is praise, and we all do it. But sometimes if we can just really narrate, wow, I'm looking at your face, you're loving that, and you did that, it can make our kids feel really, really good. Another thing we can do is we can hold our limits to teach social awareness. You want the big truck? Isabella is using it, but look at her face. She is not done. I won't let you take it from her. I'm here and we can wait together. Here's one for Emily. I know you love watching TV. I know you've had the best time doing your iPad. We're going to have one episode and then we're going to go and play with our Lego Duplo. Or we're going to have one episode and then you tell me which stories you'd like me to read you and I'll read you a bit of your favorite book tonight before you go to bed. So what we're trying to do is create a bridge out of that screen time. We're going to ditch the guilt and we're just going to create beautiful bridges and beautiful boundaries out of our screen time, but we're going to use play. So closing out today very, very quickly, I want to sort of say, look, it's not all highs in my house. And this is a beautiful shot from a few years ago when my children had built the biggest Lego Duplo tower ever. You can see my two older sons in the picture and my baby is in the corner of that shot. And what happened within a second of me taking this photo is that tower crashed down to the ground. The children were fighting about whose fault it was. The baby was crying because it had been a big bang. And let me just tell you, nobody was a good kid and cleaned up their room that night, no matter what I bribed or begged. It was one of those days where it all goes wrong. And I just want to acknowledge that despite all of these beautiful tips about using play to get your kids to put on their shoes, some days things just go pear-shaped. And I want you to know there is beauty in that as well. And if we can do our very best to sort of say, oh, this is disappointing, and we move on, it can make a really big difference in helping our kids to process all of that as well. So wanted to just finish on that very real note, and I wanted to say, be your own best friend. We're only trying to do any of the stuff I talk about 30% of the time. I only take my own advice 30% of the time, and I just can't stress it enough how important that is. Modern parents, you guys who are on a Zoom on your Tuesday night are incredible. You are being reflective. You are learning about how to play with your children better. And I promise you there were very few parents in the 80s or 90s doing a similar thing. You're doing so much better than you realize. So please, please be kind to yourself. And that is it. So I'll stop sharing and just see if there were questions. And I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, I've got some here, Jen. That was amazing. I was very much writing notes, and I feel like when you put the stick up in my childhood, that could have been a picture of a big wooden spoon, and it would have had the same message. But speaking of, I've got a couple of questions that I'll fire through, but other people, please do. We've only got about 5 minutes left. But a big kudos, because we do have a question from N, and she's on board with a 4-week-old newborn joining the Zoom. So well done. And in part, you did cover this, but obviously just feeling really guilty, gosh, particularly in those early days, that she doesn't have time to play with her firstborn, who's 3.5 years old.
Got one. Just sit down on the couch to breastfeed and just say to your older child as you get the baby onto the breast, or actually to bottle feed, and what am I saying? You can feed any way you want. There's, no pressure in how you feed. You sit down to feed your baby, which you're going to have to do lots of times a day, and you say to your older child, I'm going to blow you 10 kisses. How many can you catch? Can you put one in your pocket? If your child is particularly active, you say, one's going high, one's going low. Can you catch it? Can you blow one back to me? Just in that tiny moment, which takes 15 seconds, you've just thrown so much connection across the room. It's playful as well, and you've made your child feel amazing. And it really doesn't have to be more complicated than that. I promise you, you are doing so well.
Gosh, yes, you really, really are. Thanks, Jen. That's such a great tip. Another great question, Christy, and it's actually something that's come up in playgroup land as well, because we often at playgroups, I think, hopefully gone or reducing of the days of McDonald's as changeover places for parents who might be single parents or have access arrangements. And Christy raised a good point, because we know a lot of changeovers happen at our playgroups, and we're seeing an increasing number of that. But Christy has asked, she works with parents who don't have custody of their children, and I feel like you've addressed it really well, Jen, but she did just say, what are some parents to engage in that meaningful play if you do only have that short period of time and not that sort of consistency?
Yeah, look, the 9 to 10 minutes of special time is one of the best ways to fill your child's emotional cup. And I want to tap onto that, a question I just saw come in, which is, should special time be done every day? Absolutely not. Like, I just can't stress that one enough. You don't have to do special time all day, and I want to explain why. Because we don't need another thing on our to-do list. Modern parents are doing more. Remember, we're playing with our kids more than any previous generation, so we're already doing amazing. I want you to think of special time as a little thing that you keep in your back pocket when you either just feel the urge, or you just notice, my kid, yeah, they're picking on their sibling, they're really struggling, we've had really tough transitions, they've had a few accidents if they're toilet training. I'm going to give them 9 to 10 minutes of really focused special time and see if I can turn this ship back around. So really just thinking of it like that, rather than something you have to do every day, because we do not need another thing on the to-do list, particularly when we're juggling multiple kids.
Thank you, Jen. That's great. So we've got a few. I'm going to try and tie a couple of questions together here, and it is sort of around rough play, risky play, but in a couple of different contexts. So Beck has, she's got a 2-year-old son, and he's not at daycare. She's a full-time mama. So she was asking how many hours a day, but also, is it true that boys need more play that is active or risky play? coupled with that, I'll couple them together, was Holly asking just tips for navigating rough and risky play, because she's not 100% comfortable and just wanting to know if that would have an adverse effect. And then also we've had the question just come through from Sophie around rough play when it comes from siblings and how to navigate that. So bit in that, Jen, sorry.
I'm going to try and
and we'll do another one too about taking play a bit too far, getting a bit overstimulated, which can lead to hitting. Do it all, Jen.
I'm going to do it all really fast. Okay, so yes, boys need more risky play, but not just boys, some girls too. So always we're going to find differences in that. So yeah, boys generally do benefit from and really enjoy a lot of rumbling. You know, it's just how they're wired. How do we make it work when we're not comfortable? Follow their lead and have a play with it, but be really clear with your limits. And this answers the what do we do when it goes too far? So if it's with us and a child, it's about we play, but there are ground rules. No hitting or hurting. You know, when someone is crying, looking uncomfortable or says stop, we stop and we check on them. Are really good ground rules for any risky play, whether it's kids playing or grown-ups playing with kids. And when your child breaks those rules, even when they're 18 months and you think, oh, well, that hit didn't hurt, really important to say, oh, no hitting. If you hit again, we'll have to stop. Okay, and no shame in that, but we'll try again tomorrow. But yeah, I don't like it when you hit. I don't want to play when you hit. That's really important. That might sound harsh, but it really helps our kids build those pro-social skills so that they can rumble safely with others. So it's through that rough and tumble play that kids are actually finding where the limits are. So it's actually one of our goals within it is to find those limits. Finally, when kids are going too far and it's our siblings or cousins or neighbours playing, I'll give you a quick example from my trampoline. Narrate out loud. I see two kids, you're having a great time. I'm looking at your face, Owen, you're having a really good time, but I'm looking at Liam's face and he looks a bit worried. Should we stop and check if he's still liking this game? Liam, do you want to tell Owen if he's still having fun? So we're just calling a horse race. We're just narrating what we see, but we're very much there to narrate and just say, oh, I can see. As a parent, we know when things are about to go out of hand. I've stood by a trampoline and gone, there will be tears in 5, 4, 3, 2. And most parents can do that. So we want to be able to do that, but we also want to be able to step in. Oh, can't allow you guys to hit. I'm here and I'm going to stop you from hitting. So we're stepping in when it goes too far.
Excellent, Jen. Gosh, again, I've learned so much.
That is my quickest answer.
You did well. Yeah, you weaved all of them in. Well done. No, really great practical tips. So, Jen, on behalf of everyone on this call, thank you so much. I've learnt a lot, very much. For everyone on this call, we do have another webinar tomorrow from Susan Hesboss at Mark's Baby Lab and looking at everyday interactions with young children and how that builds their skills and resilience. And so we will pop in the chat the links to that. And thank you so much, Jen. Please do. I've actually a lot of the things about like boundary setting and saying, no, Jen didn't even know this isn't part of the promo, but there's actually some really great practical tips in this book around the carrot and the stick approach and when things go a bit too far. So highly recommend the book. And thank you very much, everyone, for jumping on board. We do have a survey. We'd love to hear from you. You can win some Lego Duplo, which is a staple in both Jen and my household. Seeing that tower though, Jen, oh my goodness, that made me feel very nervous. Otis got Lego Ferrari for Christmas from Grandma and I trod on it. So that was not a great moment in our household. So I could really resonate with that. But thank you, everyone, for taking time out of your night so much. Thank you, Jen. And we'll see you again very soon. You can jump on our Playgroup Week website for details of there's another webinar tomorrow. We'll send out the slides and the recording from tonight. And we'll see you all again very soon. Happy National Playgroup Week.
Thank you so much, everyone. And look, if there's any burning question I missed, you can DM me on my Instagram, Connected Parenting AU as well.
Amazing. Thank you. And thank you for the great questions as well. They were so great. Thank you.
Bye.